and I'll let you know. We're live.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 17th, 2024 meeting of the Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee of the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees. This meeting is being held in person with committee members participating remotely. At this time, Board Secretary Michelle Carreri will conduct a roll call attendance to determine if a quorum is present. Please respond clearly via present via WebEx or present in person when your name is called.
Robbie Luna, Matthew Lenz,
Present via WebEx.
Joseph Formicola,
Present via WebEx.
David Moderano,
Present via WebEx.
Reva Goyal,
Present via WebEx.
David Caprio, Michael Gray, Mark Parlange.
Present via WebEx.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. A quorum is present. I'll call this meeting to an order. Reminder to all members, for the benefit of our audience and the note taker, please clearly identify yourself whenever you comment, make a motion, or second to a motion. Participants using WebEx are required to keep their cameras on, as remote members and all persons present at the meeting location must be clearly audible and visible to each other. At this time, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Rhode Island occupies the traditional stopping grounds of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic people. Are there any proposed amendments to the published agenda? All right, hearing none, I think we can get started. The first order of business is approval of the minutes. May I have a motion that the Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee approve the minutes of the April 4th, 2024 meeting of the committee?
So moved for Formicola.
Thank you, Joe.
Second, David Moderano.
Thank you, David. Any discussion on the motion? There being no discussion, can I get a voice vote? All in favor?
Yes.
All opposed? Any abstentions? The motion to approve the minutes of the April 4th, 2024 committee meeting is approved. I'd also like to acknowledge that our board chair, Margot Cook, is present. The next order of business is the agenda item 2, discussion items. I believe first up, we have an annual update on cybersecurity, and I'll pass it over to Abby.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm actually going to turn it over to our interim CIO, Gabriel Ferriello, to give an annual update on cybersecurity. We recently made an adjustment to the calendar that this will be an annual update in open session, generally on our cybersecurity activities. So I'll turn it over to Gabriel.
Oh, thank you. Are these the current slides?
Oh, I don't think those are. I'm happy to share them. So
I can share as well if I may share the screen.
I wasn't sure.
Those are the slides, right? Update on cybersecurity. Do you see them?
Oh, yes, I see
Okay.
them. It was just the name was changed to reflect the fact that I'm giving the speak. But so can we advance the slides? Thank you. Oh, so these are not the correct slides. Yep. Is it okay if I share?
please go ahead.
All right. Share. Other applications. Will it let me share? My apologies.
How about, do you want to send it over to Michelle and then you can talk about it while we get it going?
Absolutely. Here we are.
Can you see the slides here?
Yep, I think we can see.
Okay.
It looks like
So Gabriel, I'll just go ahead and advance them if you want to go ahead.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. Next one. So I know that some you on the board have already heard this. We received a third-party incident report. These are the forensic investigators. They found no evidence of unauthorized network activities or staging for ransomware, no unauthorized access to sensitive data, no evidence of any data extraction, so basically exfiltration. So we don't think that there's any of the data went out of our system. And no evidence of additional malware, malicious software, or other staging practices. So staging is when they go in there and put something, a backdoor, to try and come in later. Next slide, please. So things of note, we took some fairly drastic measures. Most of you probably remember you had to reset your passwords. It does seem like those interventions likely prevented additional issues. One of the silver linings of this cloud, if you will, is that we substantially upgraded the cybersecurity insurance posture of eCampus. eCampus is three main systems, but basically we've implemented application firewall, web application firewall properly. It was not properly configured before. This was all held by a third party. We've already discussed about the merits of continuing with this third party in a previous IRCC meeting. We've implemented what's called rate limiting, so now people can't try thousands of logins per second, but they're, if they do try 3 million logins, it'll take them years and years, and we'll notice beforehand. We've added significant secure logging that's no longer stored on the infrastructure but sent away. So we have full access. Even if a malicious actor gets in there, we'll be able to see what happened after the fact. Next slide, please. So interventions, additional security measures allowed us to get slightly better coverage. Kara Larson was instrumental in that as well. I think she's on this call. At 25% lower costs than we did last year. So in spite of the fact that we had this incident, our response and the review allowed us to secure better overall cybersecurity insurance for the university. I'm very proud of that. Next slide, please. So as of June 3rd, Gmail and all Google products are under a single sign-on, which is the same sign-on as for Brightspace, our learning management system, and most other systems at the university. What does this mean? Well, it means that if we have the unfortunate event happen again, we won't have to force everybody to change their Gmail password anymore because it's under this multi-factor authentication scenario. Although it's more secure, it's not complete. So now we have additional project, which is to bring eCampus, which is the last remaining bastion that's not under single sign-on, under single sign-on. We absolutely anticipate that this will be done by the time of fall semester. It also includes something that's called data masking. So it basically people who have access to these systems that generally expose data, which they don't necessarily need to have access to for their job duty, that data will be masked. So for example, people might only be able to see the last 4 digits of somebody's social security number as opposed to the whole thing. These are all being implemented. They're not done yet. But we, as I said, August of this year, before September and the fall semester starts, this will all be tied up. I can't stress enough how important this will be for the cybersecurity posture. This means that all major infrastructure, ERP systems, and major systems for the operation and containment of sensitive data at the university will finally be under single sign-on with multi-factor authentication. And that does mean, it doesn't mean that people can't get in, but it does mean that it can get extraordinarily difficult based on industry reviews. A minimum of about 98% of all current attacks happen on systems that don't have this, successful attacks, and that's the lower bound estimate. And so we'll be infinitely better off than we were in February when I first started here and we had the cybersecurity incident. Next slide, please. Or is that the last? No. Okay. So here are the things that we're also doing on top of that major project. We're doing a systemic review of code, configurations and processes underway. This takes a long time because aside from being relatively lean in our staffing, we have a lot of systems to undergo. We've already discovered some things that required remediation pretty quickly. We did that. As we go through, we'll be tightening up cybersecurity in general outside of the single sign-on sphere. We'll also make it so it's much harder for people who are right now have administrative privileges to look at things without it being properly logged and mitigated. It's not the case that we want to prevent administrators from looking at things, but we always want to know who looked at what, when, and why, right? We're updating the ITS policies and procedures. We're doing this hand in glove with the faculty who are very concerned about the previous iteration. I have to say that the process is going very, very well, but we're letting the faculty drive the timeline because we have policies that serve us well from a cybersecurity perspective, not so well from a community perspective. So as long as they're happy with the timelines and it's taking a little bit longer because of that, there's no risk to the university. So I'm letting them drive the timeline. But the hope is that in the beginning of the fall, this will be all wrapped up. And then we started down the road of implementing a comprehensive business continuity and disaster recovery plan. Many of you might be familiar with this. It goes under different names in different places, but a BCDR basically says we have a strategy for every single major system. What do we do if that system goes offline? How do we continue business? How do we mitigate it if part of the system goes offline but another one doesn't? And then how do we recover, the disaster recovery? It's, by the way, I don't want to impress that there is no BCDR. We just have a very high level one, and we're creating a much deeper one with far more detail. That is something that I'm a little bit more accustomed to at some other organizations where I've been. Any questions? I was told to be fast, so I spoke quickly.
Well, we appreciate it. It sounds like things are moving right along. I would just emphasize to the faculty, if somebody can pass this along, this is the important part. I know it's a pain to have to do multiple logins to do the zero trust architecture, but it is really important for the safety and security of our information. So thank you for that. Any questions from the other board members? All right, thank you very much. We will now move on to discussion item B, review of external audit plan. Abby, you're the first person I have mentioned on here, but I don't know if you want to throw it to
Yeah, that's great. So we heard from our external auditors 3 times last year. In June for an overview of the expected audit plan, in September kind of an update on how it was going, and then November a review of our audited financial statements. In the calendar, we've shifted that. So in June, the committee will get an update on the plan for our audit for the upcoming effort. And then in November, we'll go through the audited financial statements. So I'm pleased to have Brian Crowley here from CLA. This is the 3rd year that CLA is conducting our audit. I also have Angela Miller, our controller and EVP of financial operations, on the call. She's our main point of contact with our auditors, and her team does a tremendous amount of work to make sure we get through that audit with hopefully a clean opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brian to just give a brief update on the plan for the upcoming audit cycle.
Great. Are the slides pulled up or? Oh, perfect. Okay. Any chance you can make that a little bigger? I don't know if everyone can see that or. Oh, excellent. Okay, so thanks, Abby and Angela. So this is our 3rd year of the engagement. So there are some nuances that I'll try to highlight to changes, and I'll try to go through this fairly briefly because there aren't a ton of significant changes, but we'll detail the scope and what we report on, staff and timing. So we've already communicated with management and also with the folks in Rhode Island as far as the staff timing deliverables to make sure that everything's done and completed on time, and that timing's pretty consistent. And I'm glad to say that the staffing side, we have almost brought the entire team back. So that continuity in year 3 allows for better efficiencies overall. The risk assessment process every year, we go through a risk-based audit, meaning that we're not looking at every transaction, but we're going through our industry standard as far as sampling and those procedures. I'll highlight on briefly, include some additional IT compliance that's a requirement is some of the new standards that come out 143, 145. So I'll highlight on that briefly. And also, feel free to stop me as I go through the presentation because we work with management, but we really work on behalf of the board. So if there's areas that are a concern to the board, they should be brought to our attention at any time during the process. Feel free to reach out to any of myself. I'm the manager on the case, and Mike Johns is the principal. So we're always happy to inform the board of anything. So feel free to keep an open line of communication, as I like to say. And that kind of dovetails into the brainstorming piece, and then also I'll highlight on some couple minor things for 24. In the past few years, we've had some big implementation of GASBs, but it's a lighter year on that side, so we can take a little bit deeper breath this year. Next slide, please. So as far as the deliverables, there's no changes in the services that we provide and what we report on. So we report that the statements are free from material misstatement. And then as part of the report, we also have compliance related to uniform guidance that we do as part of our single audit procedures, laws, compliance, regulations. So that's a separate report. And we also have a report on the statements themselves, that they're free from material statement. And if there are any issues, we would modify those reports. In the previous 2 years, I can pleasantly say that there are no modifications to the report. So that comes as a clean opinion, as the term that is rendered, and we kind of use that in like lay terms as far as the financials. Other communications. So at the start of any engagement, we have an engagement letter that's signed, and we have a multi-year engagement, so that's just kind of updated for new verbiage each year. So that started at the beginning of the audit. At the end of the audit, we'll get a representation letter from management noting that everything that's provided is accurate and complete. If there were any kind of communications or issues that we consider best practice, we communicate that to management as we go through the audit. If there was any kind of finding, whether it's a compliance finding for the single audit or if finding related to your financials, we communicate that prior to it being issued, but we bring that to your attention. And in previous years, similar to those other issues, there were no reports or modifications or communications in formal writing. Next slide, please. So as I noted previously, planning, throughout the year, we're always open to questions, any kind of new compliance, any kind of new anything going on the campus that's new. So Angela's always reaching out to us, and we're communicating on any kind of pertinent issues, so we can work through it. So it's not everything done at year end. So we try to get ahead of the curve on that stuff. As far as planning, the planning procedures are underway. Making good progress. I'll note on it later, but as part of our planning, we try to do as much of the single audit compliance work that we can. So this year will be an R&D cluster that's tested. In previous years, a student financial assistance. So shifting gears, and that's determination isn't made by the school; it's made by the state. So we follow their guidelines and do those procedures. So the timeline on the procedures haven't really changed. So I'm not going to talk too much on this, but unless Angela has anything to say on the timeline. But it's pretty straightforward previous years, and we just work to make sure all our reports and deliverables are met by the state's kind of needs and timeline. As I noted previously, it's a risk-based audit, so we focus on areas where there can be management override controls. That's either through journal entries or any other kind of manipulation to data. So that's a key control that we focus on all different phases, no matter what section of the audit that we're working on. And also revenue recognition, that's always the required significant risk. So we have additional procedures in place to make sure that from our side, we're applying risk-based procedures for those significant areas. The areas of focus are pretty small as well. I don't know if you can make that a little bit bigger. Perfect, thank you. So this changes from year to year and based on what we consider to be the high risk areas. So tuition revenue, grants, are always anything that has any kind of estimates or any kind of subject to any kind of interpretation or a new GASB are always areas of focus. Property and equipment, just based on the dollar value and material nature of those assets, and then completion of liabilities, making sure all those liabilities are complete and fairly stated. And then as far as newer GASBs in the last year, PPP and SABITAs were implemented, so those are slightly more risky just because everyone's getting a little bit more used to some of the reporting and some of the nuances of some of those agreements, investments, and then as part of testing, we do internal control. So we rotate between some of the cycles during our procedures. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've already kind of highlighted on these, so I'll go through this very briefly. As far as so federal awards are what drive the tests for the single audit for the compliance piece. So as part of that, we've gotten estimates through I think it was mid-May that we used as some of our starting point to get some of those testing going for those programs. This year, as I know, it'll be R&D, so that's part of a cluster. So you have significant amount of research and development funds that go through the university. So those programs are tested based on risk-based sampling as well. So we're underway in starting that process. So we're making good headway on that. And then just in general, the CFA, we'll reconcile the total expenditures, which drive the calculations. We'll reconcile those totals at year end. But for planning purposes, we use the preliminary numbers to get an idea of where everything stands during the year. Next slide. So this is a point, if there's any kind of concerns or any issues that you want to bring my attention, feel free to, let me know if there's anything that, is, doesn't let you sleep at night kind of term. But, in general, we're pretty comfortable with the procedures that we complete. We incorporate, all sorts of different factors. We get confirmation from outside parties. We look at legal for any kind of potential liabilities that could be out there. And as far as the focus from year to year, as we're going through anything new, as we're looking at the minutes, we make sure to make note of that and incorporate that into our procedures. And every year we kind of rotate through unpredictable procedures, so it's not the same game plan every single year. So there is that risk base and the unpredictable element to tests. And as far as previous years, all of those requests have been complied with management without any kind of issues. I guess to go back, I don't know if there's any fraud or any actual or known fraud. That was something we want to be notified of. At this point, we've been discussing with management. Nothing's been brought to our attention, but there is. Feel free to reach out and let me know if there's anything that we should be aware of. This is just kind of a general slide, and this is stuff that you guys are, I'm sure well aware of and working with every single day as far as on the rating side of things. I believe the ratings were stable and neutral. I can't remember which is which from Moody's and then Fitch. But so basically they take a look at all the schools and, debt related instruments and revenue and projections. So a stable rating is, fairly, to be expected with the current environment. Enrollment, everyone's been talking about the enrollment cliff and the challenges to keep and maintain and get graduate students in. So all those changes, there's nothing really that you're not aware of on that front. Same thing on the finance side. Inflation, impacts everyone and goes across the board. So that's part of the process as far as our analytics. So we incorporate that into our testing procedures. As far as AI, that's a new kind of area that everyone should be aware of that's coming and how does it impact not just the campus, but as far as what your university does with that information. So it's a interesting and kind of challenging time. So as far as some schools ask questions on that, so feel free to reach out as things go along, or what's your policy on AI, and we'll definitely communicate and work with you on that kind of information. And then the last part, just the higher ed's always in the news. You can't go a day without seeing something in any kind of magazine or article about New York Times. What's different opinions, and so those are just kind of bullet points there. So I can go to the next slide. So as I noted before, this is a very quiet year on the GASB front, which I think Abby, Angela, everybody was glad that we get a little bit of a break this year. It's been a heavy lift implementing leases, gas, FAT, and all the SABITAs and all that other PPP stuff, and evaluating. So this year, there's nothing too significant as far as on the kind of the accounting side of things, the estimates. GASB 100 relates to if there was an error or correction, or it really just clarifies some of the language and how those amounts are reported and shown on your financials as far as a change in an estimate, is it perspective, prospective. So that's really just kind of a cleanup of some of those previous reporting issues. Next year, there will be compensated absences will be a piece of it, and that's another one, 102, that as far as just kind of clarifying some of the new terminology with PTO and all those changes, but that's for next year. One other point here is just, still, like I said, in the risk assessment, still focusing on the SABITAs and the PPPs, as those are still fairly new. So as those agreements change or adjusted, just make sure that you make us aware, and we work together and make sure that everything's reported properly. As far as the standards, as I noted before, there's increased in focus on some of the IT related issues. CLA has always been very proactive in this. So as far as our procedures, they're enhanced, but not changed too significantly. As far as GLBA was implemented last year, we went through those testing procedures on the single audit side of things. But now the standards require us to do enhanced meetings and coordination and making sure all the IT pieces tie into the procedures and risk-based approach we have on the financial side of things. So we meet regularly and make sure that board and management are apprised of any kind of recommendations or anything else that comes about through those procedures. And it's really can be a big value add, as was noted earlier. It's a very challenging environment to try to handle all these IT issues and concerns. So part of this is just tying our risk-based audit procedures into those new IT standards, SAS 143 to 145. And I think this is more of a reporting kind of change, as far as not necessarily too difficult to pull the information, as far as some statistical information that will require to be included or attached to the financials. So it'll just be some additional procedures on our side to kind of test some of these things that we report on, because if it's in a report, we need to complete procedures. So some of the requirements from the Department of Education and other entities have kind of pushed some of these statistical amounts, as far as different demographics of incarcerated students and some other kind of course offerings and some of that detail. So not necessarily too significant on a financial side, really. It's just a reporting, and we will need to do some procedures to report on those amounts. And that is our plan. So I don't know if I went through that too quickly, if there's any questions, or if anyone has any kind of follow-up points.
Brian, is it okay if I make just a couple of comments before we get to questions, or Matt, is that okay? So I know you referenced SABITAs. So those are basically the subscription-based kind of IT services. So that's something that's been relatively new, being looked at in depth. And then PPPs are public-private partnerships, which we don't currently have significant PPPs right now. I just wanted to clarify, there were a lot of acronyms for folks that may not be thinking about that. Also, you mentioned AI. I don't know if Gabriel's still on the call, but that is something clearly as a university we're looking at, both on the kind of academic and research side, and contemplating what policies might need to be put in place and looking at peers. So we have there was a provost task force that did some initial looking, and then we have a series of groups on campus looking at AI as it's clearly impacting higher ed more broadly. And then finally, just for the IRCC committee members, in the past we have set up meetings between the IRCC chair and our external auditors. So, but obviously, if there's any desire for members of the committee or the board at all to communicate with our external auditors, we certainly want to make sure that door is open, since, as Brian mentioned, they're really reporting on your behalf on our financials. So we'll set up that annual meeting, but that avenue should always be open.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. I'm personally good, unless we see a red flag during the course of your audit that needs to be attention to before I believe it's November when you give the actual presentation, if I'm remembering correctly. So, if a red flag arises, please, I think that's appropriate for us all to be in the loop there. But if not, we'll just wait till your November presentation. Any questions from the rest of the board members? No. Brian, thank you very much. It's much appreciated. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Yep. Pleasure working with you guys. Thanks.
We will move to discussion item C, the Enterprise Compliance Program Overview. Abby, I'm going to pass that back to you to kick it off.
Great, thank you. So this is an item, so we tried to put on the calendar regular updates on various aspects of our risk and enterprise risk management portfolio. So I'm very pleased that we have Lindsay Nottage here, who's our Director of Enterprise Compliance. She works under AVP Kara Larson, who's our AVP for Enterprise Risk Management. And Lindsay does a great job sort of managing overall the various areas that we need to be in compliance on at the university. So the goal of this presentation is really just to give the committee kind of a high-level update on the program that she manages and what the approach is that we take to governance risk and controlling risk. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lindsay for the presentation.
Great. Thank you very much. Are you guys seeing my screen? Hopefully the slides are up.
Yes, we see it.
All right, awesome, very good. So thanks so much, Abby, and the committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you today regarding the Enterprise Compliance Office and Program. So let me begin by talking through and highlighting the Governance, Risk, and Compliance Framework, GRC framework, we have in place at URI. So this is a structured approach that helps us to manage our risk, ensure we're in compliance, and aligns with our strategic goals. So the governance element is really ensuring that our management and oversight activities are aligned with our objectives. It reflects leadership's commitment to fostering a strong ethical culture, ensuring that we adhere to the right processes and controls and as we execute our strategic plan. The risk management component identifies and mitigates internal and external factors that could hinder our progress. And by proactively managing these risks, we're safeguarding the achievement of our plan. And then finally, compliance in this element in the aspects of it ensures that we're obviously compliant with all regulations, standards, internal policies. And by doing so, we're avoiding any legal penalties, reducing our reputational risks, and safeguarding and promoting ethical conduct. So this GRC framework is really designed to support the university's mission and vision. It contributes to our long-term sustainability and success. So recognizing the importance of compliance, the university leadership added the Enterprise Compliance Office in my role about 2.5 years ago to strengthen and mature this element. So the mission of the Enterprise Compliance Office is to safeguard the integrity of our institution, promote a culture of compliance, transparency, and accountability, which is in direct alignment with one of our university values, and that is self and institutional reflection of our values in our work, scholarship, and interactions, holding ourselves, each other, and the institution accountable to uphold them to a high standard. So as mentioned, the addition of the Compliance Office is really intended to strengthen the university's compliance environment. And let me show you a bit of what that looks like. So URI has always maintained a solid compliance environment to navigate an ever-changing and ever-evolving regulatory landscape. And throughout our history of our university, throughout our university, I should say, there are various roles within departments and functions that include compliance in their job titles or as part of their job responsibilities. So these positions we have strategically placed closest to the regulatory environment within their specific functions. They tend to have deep understanding of both internal and external factors and the regulatory landscape impacting their areas. So they're also active in associations, communities. They maintain connections with counterparts and other institutions to share challenges and best practices. So for example, we have a chief NCAA compliance officer who is embedded within athletics and sits in MACL, and that individual is fully immersed in the regulatory aspects of the collegiate sports and connected with other institutions and the NCAA. And we have our Director of Financial Aid and Enrollment Services, who is one of many that maintains responsibilities for ensuring compliance with one or more requirements of Title IV of the Higher Education Act, which is a very dynamic and ever-changing regulatory environment right now. But I do want to emphasize that compliance is not limited to those individuals that have compliance in their job title or in their job description. It is actually our collective responsibility as members of the university community to maintain and ensure compliance in everything that we do. So although this decentralized model has been effective over the years, we, like many institutions, have faced challenges with it related to visibility, escalation, accountability, and even missed opportunities for efficiencies and best practice sharing. So the integration of the Enterprise Compliance Office is now considered a best practice across other institutions as well as ours. So this is a central office collaborating with various departments, offering advice and support in the design and implementation of new processes and controls. And it brings together multiple partners and subject matter experts, facilitates the sharing of best practices across the university. And the office maintains objectivity. We conduct gap assessments, efficiency reviews, and track and monitor remediation efforts. So while the visual actually shows these similarly shaded overlap areas between enterprise compliance and the different functions, in reality, that level of overlap and support actually changes and adjusts continuously based on risk. So the enterprise compliance office is nimble, adaptable, recognizing that no one compliance risk or activity is the same, and each requires individual assessment. So let me give you some examples of how we are engaged. So the scope of our work is assessed individually based on need and prioritized based on risk. And so we have a chart here really just to show a sampling of the type of work that we do, just to give you a flavor. Along the x-axis, we have impact, and that really ranges from low, where it's limited to an individual, an activity or a function within the university, all the way over to high, where all departments are impacted, basically it's university-wide impact. And then along the y-axis is our scope of work, and it ranges from sort of limited advisory work all the way down to full scope reviews, sizable engagements at the bottom. And most of our activities you'll find are really on the right-hand side, the far right quadrant, really supporting those university-wide impacts, but there's also significant value in some of those smaller targeted efforts as well. So let me just highlight just a few of them. The top left-hand quadrant, our activities focused on limited scope, such as one-on-one advisory sessions, reviews of specific situations for potential conflicts of interest. Some of the activities include gap assessments, and they may be very specific to certain regulatory requirements. And one of these was the Drug-Free Schools and Community Act. We looked at a very specific requirement there. Or they can be related to investigations that are focused on whatever the certain incident was. The bottom left-hand quadrant, the example here relates to work we did to prepare for and support an external review. And this was the Foreign Agricultural Service, and they perform periodic civil rights compliance reviews over funded research projects. And so we did an informal readiness assessment in preparation and supported the department during the external review. Moving over to the top right quadrant, these are broader university-wide initiatives, such as the work that we're doing to support financial value transparency, gainful employment, new Higher Ed Act requirements. And so the project team is actually led by our institutional research office, and enterprise compliance is on that team monitoring the implementation and just providing advisory support right now. And that could change over time depending on the need and the risk. And the quadrant also includes things like adding university-wide trainings, communications, and delivering the annual ethics awareness campaign. And then the bottom right-hand corner, this is reviewing, assessing, enhancing current compliance activities like policies and procedures relating to FERPA, where we established a small group of subject matter experts. We're collaborating on enhancements to make this area and messaging across the university clearer and more consistent. And additionally, we are leading a PCI data security standards compliance project with coordinating with external consultants. We have a team of core individuals from IT and controller's office, as well as an extended team of partners across the university, really looking to build compliance maturity in this area. So this is really just a glimpse of scope and impact of the type of work that we do. So finally, I just want to touch upon the Department of Justice guidance on the elements of an effective compliance program, which we strive to meet. Higher education institutions use this as a guide in establishing their programs. It's based on observed violations and control gaps and weaknesses found at other organizations that were found guilty of criminal activity. So these elements are consistent with best practices we expect in mature risk and control environments. And we have, and like all organizations, continued to enhance and evolve each one of evolve each one of these elements. So we have established policies and procedures that guide our ethical standards and behaviors. We have an investigation process that is very robust, ensuring a thorough and fair examination of compliance issues. We continuously add learning pathways to educate and inform the community about compliance topics. We have an ethics hotline for anonymous reporting, and we're constantly encouraging a culture of transparency and accountability through that. And then finally, we have disciplinary procedures that align with our values, enforcing accountability and making sure we're taking appropriate action for any compliance violations. So by continuously maturing activities relating to these elements, we're ensuring our compliance program is effective, responsive, and aligned to expected practices. So as noted, this program is evolving. So I welcome any feedback, suggestions as we continue to grow and mature the office. So with that, I will take any questions.
Thanks, Lindsay. Any questions from the board members? Do have one, Lindsay. I'm just wondering, do you do like an annual like short report? I don't want it to be long, but just something, or do we have a regular cadence with you? I forget if we have that on the calendar.
Yeah, Abby, is that the compliance reporting that we do? I'm not sure if it's still on the docket or if we.
Yeah, so we actually used to have an item when the IRCC committee was created. We had a kind of compliance calendar update, but one of the suggestions we had with the committee calendar is that it wasn't really worth updating on the calendar. We'd rather give you an annual compliance update. So that's really what this is. So we can certainly, we'll make sure that Lindsay is on the docket with IRCC at the June meeting, and she can update on specific projects if there's something of interest, but we wanted to give you kind of an overview of the program.
That works. Just want to make sure that we're seeing Lindsay. It's an important job, so glad that we'll hear from her. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, Lindsay. We are now moving on to discussion item D, new Title IX regulations. It's Abby's show today.
Yeah, so I think we've briefed you on this item at every IRCC meeting since I've been in the role. So I hope that we won't have to brief you on it in the future, because we have been waiting for regulations, a final rule to come out on Title IX, and it kept getting pushed off by the federal government. So they finally did release the rule in April, and the compliance update, the date that it's effective is August 1st. So our team, led by Kara Larson, our AVP for Enterprise Risk Management, but includes a lot of people in our Student Affairs organization, in our Office of General Counsel. There's a big team working to make sure that we are compliant with the new rule. So a key part of that is updating our policy, which is being shown on the screen right now that you all have in your enclosure, which is a policy on non-discrimination and sexual misconduct. So I'm going to turn it over to Kara just to give a brief overview of the changes to the policy that are being made in order to comply with the new rule. I think you're on mute, Kara.
Sorry about that. Hello. As Abby said, we've been talking about this pretty much nonstop for 2 years. And when last we met in April, it was just before the regulations, the final regulations were published. But now they're out. So we leapt into action and we have updated the draft policy that we had been working on for 2 years, while the proposed regulations were sitting out there, gaining over 250,000 comments that had to be responded to by the Department of Education. So just a brief overview, and the purpose of bringing this here to you today is this is in preparation for its recommended approval by the board at the full meeting on the 28th, and also to be reviewed by the governance committee next week. So just real briefly, to remind you, so some of the major changes that were made by these new regulations from the existing 2020 regulations were it expanded the definition of discrimination, to include sex stereotypes, sex characteristics, sexual orientation, and gender identity, which is a very broad increase. And it also included additional protections for pregnancy and related conditions for both students and employees. It increased the scope of jurisdiction to any conduct, even if it occurs outside of our program and activities or outside the geography of the United States, if it has an impact on someone's ability or equal access to participate in our education programs and activities. So while we may not have jurisdiction over the incident in terms of holding someone responsible, our obligation is still to provide any remedy for impacts that carry over into our specific program. It also went back to mandated reporting, and in our it had different categories of mandated employees. We've simplified that in the final version of this policy and made all non-confidential employees have the same reporting obligation to report to the Title IX office. That was going to be simpler to administer than trying to distinguish between employees with administrative and oversight or teaching responsibilities. So, so we've sort of gone above and beyond. There's also mandatory training for all employees that we will be rolling out, and we will need to be able to document 100% completion. So that's kind of the upshot. The only other breaking news in this area is that as of today, there are now 10 states where these new regulations have been enjoined: Idaho, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Ohio, Montana, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. These are among the many states that have sued to enjoin these new regulations, primarily around the additional protections based on gender identity and expression. And so the injunctions have basically said that the Department of Education has gone beyond its rulemaking authority and has attempted to actually change the law, which was intended to prevent discrimination against women and girls. So going on the premise that sex is a binary concept, discrimination on the basis of sex can only apply to discrimination on the basis of whether one is male or female, not how one expresses one's gender. So that is going to be an interesting debate as these lower court injunctions make their way up into the circuits and eventually to the United States Supreme Court. We don't anticipate having an injunction that would impact Rhode Island by August 1. So we are moving forward full steam ahead to put the policy into place and then to craft the procedures that would comply with the new procedural grievance framework in the new regulations. So if there are any questions.
Any questions from the members?
I'll also just add thanks to the president for helping us invest in resources in hiring a full-time Title IX coordinator. So we've been looking and are pleased that we are having a new one start shortly. We have several people working in this space, but having a person dedicated on campus, I think will make a tremendous difference in our ability to execute on these investigations quickly. So we're excited about that.
Yep. Can't wait for Monday.
I'm sure, and you've been doing a lot of great work on this, Kara, so thank you very much. You know, unfortunately, this might be something that is in the national dialogue for a period of time. It could become a political football every 4 years. Hopefully, you don't have to go through this every 4 years, but good to know that we're adding the additional resources. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item number 3, approval of amendments to the Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee charter and calendar. Abby, would you like to discuss this action item?
Great, thank you. So on the calendar, we are slated as a committee, you're slated to review the calendar and the charter in April and approve any changes to the calendar and charter in June. So in April, we brought to you several changes. Mostly to the calendar. A lot of it is after I've been in this role for a year and working with the committee, just trying to clarify what we think are the most important items for the committee to review. and we made some minor adjustments to the charter. We have not made any changes since the committee reviewed it in April, so this is just an action item to approve those changes to the calendar and the charter that are outlined in your enclosure.
Thank you very much, Abby. Any questions for Abby? Right then, the proposed amendments to the Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee Charter and Calendar included in the enclosure were reviewed by this committee at the April meeting. May I have a motion?
So moved, Joe Formicola.
Thank you. A second.
David Monterano, second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye, yes.
Aye. All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, looks like that item is approved. The last item on this agenda is item number 4, the adjournment. May I have a motion?
I
So
make a
moved, Joe. Good, Dave.
so move.
There's only two
David
of you.
Monterano.
Go with David. All right, David, you're gonna. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, any noes? Any abstentions? Well, thank you very much, folks. Look forward to seeing you at the next meeting of the Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee. That is tentatively scheduled for September, although I think I'll see you all at the meeting next week, where we're having our full meeting?